Hello and welcome back to another edition of Black Eyes on White Movies. I am Aaron Covington, along with
Bernard Harris filling in for Amanda Dummer.
and Amon. Yeah, Amon is has some other obligations today. He might jump in later. I don't know. I don't know if he has the time, but he had to do something else, so he's not here today. So once again, just me and Bernard. And this week we're talking about Minority Report,
Yeah, Minority Report.
starring Tom Cruise, directed by Steven Spielberg, based on a novel by Philip K. Dick, set in Washington, D.C.
Just break it down all the way.
Yeah, action, sci-fi action for sure.
Definitely
So
neo
much action,
noir.
so much action in this movie.
Oh, for sure. It's definitely got like a neo noir feel to it. Like it's actively going for like that noir sense too. But yeah, I would say primarily sci-fi action.
Yeah, way more action than I even like really remembered in a way.
Yeah, yeah. I remembered all the action beats individually, I guess. But like seeing them all strung together again, it was like, damn, this movie must stop. Anyway,
Let Let's talk quickly about a black movie for this one.
yeah.
Um, because with some of the things we do, it's like, well, what's the black movie? Because it's just not black led movies that are made that are like this.
Mm-hmm.
Like in terms of budget and concept, having a high concept, we a lot of times it's just kind of few and far between. And then there's sometimes you think of one and it's like, oh, maybe there's a better movie for that to be the black movie of the week. Like what was this Netflix sci-fi one that just came out with Boyega? They clone Tyrone?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, but that's more, kind of about clones and almost has a Groundhog Day effect. And, you know, but it's not a bad choice for this. But I kind of wanted to also think about older black led action movies. So I kind of like Passenger 57, which is not
Mm,
really a black movie, but feels like a black movie. I mean, it stars Wesley Snipes, which tilts the scale quite a bit, you know, just off top, regardless of who like wrote it or anything. It's like, oh, Wesley Snipes in it. That's pretty black. It's pretty black.
for sure, for sure.
And of course, a great soundtrack by Stanley Clark. So I think that's what I'm gonna go with. Did you have any ideas or suggestions? Oh, Passion
Nah.
57 is directed by a black man, Kevin Hooks,
Oh, I guess I never knew that.
but it was written
Wow.
by white guys. And it straddles a line. And then in the movie, it's like Wesley's like the only black guy in the movie,
For sure.
So it's like, is it a black movie?
That is
It
quick
leans
question.
black.
Quick question. That is the one with like the tall, pale white dude with super like long hair, or is that the one with John Lithgow as a bad guy? I
No, the
haven't
first
seen.
John Lithgow's not in this one.
Okay, okay. Is John Lithgow in the Wesley Snipes movie? It's been
Probably,
so long since I've seen
probably.
Passenger 57. Anyways.
It has been a long time. I think I caught a half hour of it in the last couple of years, late night or
Mm,
something. But it was on TV, and when you get those commercials, at some point you're trying to watch a movie late. I can't do a late movie with commercials anymore.
yeah, I get that. I get that. Like that's an easy stop. That's an easy stopping point to shut the
Yeah,
TV off. Ain't gonna be it.
about a third run of commercials, and the later it is, or if you happen to be on a couple of specific channels that just run commercials into the ground, and it's like, okay, I'm not even watching a movie anymore. I'm watching commercials with inter splices
Yeah.
of a movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the movie is a commercial for the commercials for sure.
Yeah.
But you asked about
If you had any,
thoughts.
yeah,
Yeah.
black movies, recommendations, suggestions, ideas.
See, the only one that I can really think of that's also not like a black movie, but it's got Denzel in it, so it's black. But is Virtuosity, which is not a great movie,
Oh, Virtuosity is an interesting
but it's kind of similar, like
comparison.
dystopian
Yeah.
future. There's a chase aspect, I think, to it too, if I remember.
Yeah, he's trying to
Um,
chase Russell Crowe, which is crazy. That
right.
movie had Russell Crowe and Denzel, and it's like pretty run of the mill,
Yeah.
you know, action movie.
Like that's one of those Russell Crowe, that's like one of those roles wherein like you realize years later, like, oh, I saw this actor in a movie long before I realized I saw him in a movie, and it was Virtuosity. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know
100%.
who Russell Crowe was until years later. And I was like, oh yeah, that's Sid 2.0.
Yep.
Great villain name. Anyways. But yeah, Virtuosity. It's kind of the closest one I could think of without
Yeah.
getting into some TV stuff, and that's not what we do.
So they cloned Tyrone, Passenger 57, Virtuosity. That's a good lineup.
I think
We'll go with
so.
that. Um, Logline, Minority Report. In a future where a special police unit is able to arrest murderers before they commit their crimes, an officer from that unit is himself accused of a future murder. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's the plot of this for sure. For sure.
Definitely.
Okay. Early thoughts.
Um, so this was a movie that I very much enjoyed back in the day. Um, on this watching, I don't enjoy it as much. I can't say that I disliked it. Um, but I can definitely for sure say that I enjoyed it significantly less.
Bro,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, man. I felt the same way. I was like, man, yeah, Minority Report. I like Minority Report. And
Yeah.
I'm watching it, I'm like, man, I don't know if I like Minority Report.
Yeah. Like, what? Wait a minute, man. Um,
I'm
I
not
thought
sure exactly what changed or what I even liked about it before now. I'm like, what did it just not age well or
I I thought about that a little bit. Like, I do think maybe it didn't age well. But also,
and what does that even mean sometimes? Like, oh, it didn't age well. So sometimes I'm like, well, what does that mean?
mm,
But
I feel like what I came to for myself is that I was really like enamored with the kind of future vision of that world,
right.
and I think that that sort of like the future high techy cool factor of it back in the day maybe allowed me to be a little bit lax on some of the filmmaking and storytelling that I didn't appreciate this time. Or also it's been 20 years, so I guess taste has changed. I've seen it since then, but I mean it
Yeah, comparing it to
not
your
recently.
first watch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is resonates with me also. It was just like it didn't hit as hard. It felt real self-serving, it felt real myopic, like very singular and what it was. And it also didn't even feel like it didn't feel like it really had any point.
Mm-hmm.
It was like ideas wrapped in action. That's it.
So I one thing I wanted to do is like I looked up a little bit about the original short story, and I kind of want to talk about that. Is this a good spot to do that?
Yeah, yeah, let's get into that.
Okay. So I think that that's going to build off of your ideas comment, right?
Right.
Is because so Philip K. Dick, for those who don't know, huge seminal sci-fi writer from the mid 20th century, and like a lot of his books and stories have been like adapted, and usually a lot of times you don't know that. Like Blade Runner is Philip K. Dick, Total Recall, a couple others. But anyways, point being is like Philip K. Dick has always been adapted because he wrote these short stories that and well, he wrote these stories that were really like trippy and dealt a lot with like, communist Red Scare America, like paranoia of the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. And his stuff is always really trippy. It always kind of like circles back on itself. It's a mind bender. And I think that one of the reasons why most of the movies that have been adapted out of his stories are a lot of times just kind of middle of the road is because like they're not committed to the weirdness factor. They want to
Mm,
get the mind bendy stuff without going weird. So like the original Minority Report story, it is kind of similar. Like basically John Anderton is the old man character, but he's still like a cop. And he finds out that he's accused of this future murder. And through a number of reasons, he ends up actually committing the murder. And he's like sent
right.
off to like another planet. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like in a penal colony on another planet. That's what I'm saying. Like it's like weird sci-fi in a weird future where there's weird
That's a
stuff
good
going on.
point. Yeah.
But they wanted something like more conventional here. And so they tried to like basically take ideas without real story. You know what I'm saying? I feel like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And they Hollywoodified it in the sense of like, okay, he's a hero. He doesn't commit the murder. He's so righteous.
Right.
It's very pro cop. How pro cop this movie was
It was
really
amazing.
stuck out this time. And I think they also, in envisioning it, they were like, well, what could the future look like? And they said, okay, well, if we have a technology in this thing where we have precogs, which wasn't really a technological thing, it was because they were raised on this drug. They were crack babies on this new drug, really.
Right. Right.
And it's like, well, what else could there be? And it's like, oh, well, when the cops find them, hear about the murder, they only have so much time. So they have to be there really fast. So we have these like ships that take them. So that's a future tech. And then I felt like so much of the movie was just like, imagine a future tech.
Mm-hmm.
We got a new drug, we got ways for people to get places. I can't remember kind of some other things. Let me see if I wrote them down. But there were other things that was just like, oh, this is just like somebody talking about what the future could look like.
Yeah.
But it's not really, a lot of the tech didn't really mean anything, you know? It was just like, it's like if a painter was like, paint a scene, a huge canvas, and you got to paint all these little parts within it that just show some kind of future tech,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And this is like for commercial use. And he's just like, oh, well, people could, computer screens will look like this, and you might drive like this, and oh, police might have guns like this. You know what I mean? It was just like, doop, doop,
Right.
doop, doop, doop. Not
Yeah.
like all purposeful or all based on a theme. It was just like, look how cool some future tech we can imagine could be and that we can show with some computer graphics.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I remember when the movie came out and I looked it up again that like they had like got together like some like think tank of like researchers and futurists and stuff like that to like
Right.
imagine what this 2054 might look like and that's all very interesting. But one thing that really struck me this time was like, you know, Spielberg said that he wanted to create basically not a dystopia, more of a utopian looking future. What if we solved climate change? What if we solved these things? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, that's evident, but also, and part of me wants to be like impressed by this, but it also felt inconsistent that like the world around them did seem kind of utopian, but like it was still a dystopian theme throughout. So like
Right.
I just don't know that the juxtaposition. I could see like you making an artistic argument for the juxtaposition there, but it didn't really mesh this time for me.
Yeah, it was kind of competing with the story, what the story should be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, this tech, and then like he can swap eyes, and it's like, what's the point of that? Is just for the story, so he doesn't get caught, right?
Right, and it's
Because then
like,
it's like they go on the subway and like they scan your eyes instead of using like a fast tap or a card or whatever. everything is like eye scan and like you're walking around, you're walking around and the ads talk to you personally, right?
Yeah, right.
And it's like, well, I
Mr.
guess that's
Covington.
cool, but this isn't a story about like the overwhelming presence of advertisements. You know what I mean? I guess that
Yeah.
was like the surveillance part of it. But to to put this technology in there and be like you said, it's still dystopian. Like
Yeah,
having my
and it's
eyes scanned to get on the subway is not a future that feels delightful to me. You
right.
know?
It's like it's interesting because I'm a big fan of a movie that came out probably 10 years or so after, well, 13 years after, but Her. And that
Oh,
kind
right,
of
her.
does a similar thing in which it like shows you a pretty decent looking future, but it still has problems of capitalism and so on and so forth. But like this one was so, to get back to sci-fi literature, this one was so cyberpunk in its like
Yeah,
theme and messaging, but like it almost, it was very corporate, man. It was like almost the corporations, rather than giving you a dark and eternally rainy downtrodden city, they gave you this bright gem. Like the corporation solved it all. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of pro-capitalist in a big way.
for sure. It's two things. One, it's like the privileged classes vision of perfection is everything is more regulated
Mm,
and everything is more space for individuality, but not individual expression, just like non-communal living. You're
yeah.
you're here, you know what I mean? And it's corporate and you're being advertised to more and they scan your eyes to pay for everything. There's never like in this movie, there's no consideration of what a utopia would be for minorities, for lower middle class, poor people, you know. So it's like, as technology advances, less and less of society gets to take part, you know?
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people only get to take part like when you're in college, you get like a free bus pass or a free subway pass,
Right.
but that's not your life. You just are using a benefit of college. So, just as an example of, when people talk about utopia, it's always technologically driven, but that's not how the more people are going to experience a benefit.
Yeah.
It's just because we have more. And then again, I don't think it was that big of it. It wasn't that prevalent then, even though it was prevalent, but the surveillance of this was actually terrifying.
It's interesting, you know, uh so one thing that struck me while watching this movie this time, right, and this only comes with 20 years worth of context, but was that this was a movie that was written and mostly finished before 9/11, but came out after 9/11.
Right. It was just crazy
You know what I mean?
how that changed so much.
For
Like, what
sure.
would this movie have been if it had been, they were writing it during 9/11 and then they were like, oh, wait, we got to change course a little bit here.
It's so funny too because when we decided to do this movie, I remembered it being a 2002 movie, not a 2000 movie. And as I was watching it, that's what made me like really notice that, because I was like, in 2002, I feel like you're already getting a sense of the surveillance state that America is becoming.
Right.
But like
The
they
Patriot Act
wrote
and stuff.
this as a critique of a surveillance state that America wasn't at the time,
Right.
but was by the time was transforming into by the time it came out. So one of the things that really struck me so weird about it was like there's so many things in this movie, including the surveillance piece of it, that just like there's no cameras.
Yeah.
Like everything he does that's illegal in the police station would be shot on camera.
Yeah.
But in a 90s world before cameras are ubiquitous, you're thinking about some crazy retina eye scanny technology. Like the the authoritarianism is much more simpler.
It's
And they
much
would have
simpler.
known that
And
just a
like,
couple years later.
it, I was thinking this too when he gets new eyes put in.
Yeah.
Like that would have to happen in the first 10 minutes of the movie, and it would have to have been a different actor playing Tom in the first 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Then he changes his face to Tom Cruise for the rest of the
Right.
movie. He would have to change his whole face, like face off style, for it to
Yes.
make any sense. He would be caught the whole movie because then they would put his face on all those ads. Like, if you see this man is wanted. He wouldn't be able to go anywhere in the city without people being like, "Oh, that's the dude that is about to
Yeah.
do a murder. He's about to murder somebody." So anytime somebody sees him, they'd be like, "Is it gonna be me?" People would be chasing him, like, "We're gonna find this
that
murderer. I just saw him on the subway, armed carry." You know what I mean?
that is a crazy thing to think about too. Is like, hey, I saw this guy. It's the guy who's about to do a murder.
Oh my goodness,
You know what I mean? Oh,
that's the guy
but
that's about to murder. He's here. It's gonna be one of us. Like, get him.
it's funny because I don't remember if I said this when we did Elysium, but Philip K. Dick is often listed as an early cyberpunk novelist. Another early cyberpunk sci-fi writer is William Gibson. He wrote a book called Neuromancer. I'm sorry. He wrote a book Mancer back in the 80s. And a couple of years ago, I was listening to an interview with him, and he was saying, if you everybody always says that Neuromancer was so ahead of its time, and he invented the word like cyberspace and all this stuff, but he's like, I feel like if I gave it to a 15-year-old nowadays, they would read 30 pages of it and they would say, "Oh, I figured out the mystery," and that's what happened to the cell phones. And the fact of the matter is, as much as he predicted about the future, he couldn't see the simple thing that was going to happen just a few years later, is that cell phones were going to come into, and everybody was going to have one.
Yeah,
And I felt like this movie was similar with like a lot, like as much a cool technology it had, it didn't think of the simple things that were actually going to transform society.
right.
You
Yeah,
know?
and just like the way they did the police, the pre-murder screens and stuff.
Oh yeah.
It's like they had to load the thing into the other thing of like a cartridge almost, and now we just have iPads. It's like, oh no, it's gonna be much simpler than that.
It's gonna be
Much
super
simpler.
simple, and it was interesting because like a lot of that stuff was interesting, like visually in this movie.
Yeah,
But to your point, I feel like with the eyes, and the retina scan, I feel like so much of this movie was like, because we already talked about and know that they really didn't adapt just really ideas from the original story and a basic premise. It really felt like these were ideas that came from elsewhere and were
yeah,
sitting around for a while, that some like maybe Spielberg or somebody else was like, could not wait to find a sci-fi thing to get this into.
yeah.
They didn't feel
Yeah.
connected to the story so
This is a
much.
sci-fi world I've been wanting to do for a long time. Let's throw a movie on top, and like they're not really necessarily super penalized for not predicting the future accurately. I mean, we
Yeah,
watch
yeah.
old sci-fi and forgive a lot of things. Um, it's just kind of interesting with this movie because of the how ubiquitous the technology is and how it's meant to be like, oh, he can't go anywhere, and it's like, well, in the future, he just would have been caught easier. But also it's, I think what we were just saying is the disconnect between story and the tech.
Mm-hmm.
The future visioning was like a convention center, and the movie was like happening in the background of the convention. And then the other thing, uh, and not to like rag on freaking Steven Spielberg. I mean,
Right, 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 right.
we're just talking about this one movie, and not even saying it's a bad movie. It's just kind of how it feels to us now. And we've seen it again. Maybe if it was your first time seeing it, if Amon jumps on or we'll ask him, he might have a slightly different view. But
Yeah, no
also the
doubt.
movie it was too much action for how heavy the themes were.
Yeah.
You're talking about predestination and basically do humans have free will, which again is a question that I think is more from the privileged class,
Mm.
right? Not just to say like white people all the time, just rag on white people, but the
Yeah, yeah,
privileged
yeah.
class, a class with time, money, and authority, I guess. Think about this a lot. I see it in a lot of white-led sci-fi projects. It's like, do people have free will? And
Yeah.
even Congress will argue about it. Do we have free will? If we don't have free will, then is anybody a criminal, or and really they mean themselves. It's like, how do we get ourselves out of because of course the
Right.
black people are criminals, but I don't know if such and such murderer or guy banker or guy that owns an island. I don't know if they it was predetermined, and it was a free, but it's not a question I feel like most people really care about. But this movie then doesn't even like really deal with it because it has to do action set piece, action set piece, action set piece.
For sure. It only even glances at like Agatha, right? The precog that we end up spending the most time with. Like it only kind of glances at the slavery that she's held in.
Right. Right.
you
It
know,
it does not ask a lot of questions about the living situation of the pre-Cox. No, not at all.
for sure. And it's like what a great opportunity to do a white slave metaphor, which sci-fi loves to do. You know what I'm saying? But they
100%.
they really didn't even touch it. And she's only freed because Tom Cruise says it. You have to help me prove that I'm innocent. Like it's
For his own good, yeah.
like you said before, it's so myopic, and I just never really remembered that. Maybe the speed of it allowed me to like really not pay attention to some of that stuff.
Even the fact that when she's freed, she like when they take her back, right? At first they take her back, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
the scientist guy is like, I'm so happy to have you back. She's not like protesting that at all.
Mm-hmm.
At least at the
Yeah.
end of the movie, they freed her, quote unquote, and she has like a family and stuff, or in the future afterwards. But during the movie, she was just like, not, didn't have a problem with being a precog, like in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Just had some bad dreams sometimes, but it wasn't really that bad. So yeah, I
Another.
think this is
Ooh,
kind of like the Star Trek thing. Oh no, go ahead. Actually, I was gonna kind of go in a different direction
so
for a second.
I'll quickly say, but I think it really does because another thing that I felt like just again different time, different era, different concerns, I suppose, but that I really found shocking was just like how much it like hints at the really creepy sexual nature of a lot of stuff that's happening in this society.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Yeah.
is that like that dude's the doctor that's watching the precogs is a super creep,
Super
especially to
creep.
Agatha, the one lady precog.
Yeah.
The jail warden is
The
clearly
jail
like a
dude.
super freak. Like
Yeah.
they're just hinting at really disturbing things happening constantly, and then it's like, nope, we're not gonna get into that. Like, wow.
And then the whole backstory for Tom Cruise's character. What I was gonna say is kind of like a Star Trek thing, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like the new Star Trek movies or the latest ones were so action heavy. But when you watch
Mm-hmm.
old Trek, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, the original series, of course there's action in these shows, but they're so contemplative. They're
Mm-hmm.
always weighing the costs of what they're doing or the technology they have to utilize or that they encounter or the people that they encounter.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of philosophical arguments and stuff. And that's what made those shows so good and so interesting. It's like you had to take a second to think about what was happening. And this movie is like the modern Trek's in that example, in this metaphor, whatever, and that it's really just the action. We don't want you to think about these things during the movie. We're not going to ask really the tough questions or get into it or have characters grapple with it. They're just going to move forward with what they need to do.
Right.
There's no ambiguity. There's no moral decision making. It's just like, you're doing this. Tom Cruise is like the cop's cop. Like, yeah, precox, we got to get to this house, stop this murder.
He's
Right from the beginning of
definitely
the movie.
he's for sure Ethan Hunt in the future cop
Yeah.
situation. Like it's just Mission Impossible, you
It's like,
know.
are you a good, yeah, 100%. He's like, are you a good cop? I'm a good cop. I do cop stuff. I
Oh,
kill,
so much screaming.
I stop murderers.
Oh, this movie was so intense. Like when I when it ended, I literally said that out loud to myself. Like that was an intense experience.
It was so intense because it's 2.5 hours. So it's like every 30 minutes is another twist to get us more
Yeah, and it
action.
doesn't let up.
Yeah.
It doesn't really let up.
And the idea that like Tom Cruise consistently invaded swarms of cops for like the first
Yeah.
hour and a half of the movie. It's like, no, no, he's caught here. He's caught here. You got to deal with that. He got to go to trial. Like,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what was so Mission Impossible about it. It was like, you know, you buy that Ethan Hunt's a super spy and he can take down 10 guys or something, but like this guy who's just the average chief of this one unit of police officers,
right.
like
He's just a cop trained like the other cops. He's really, and he's a drug addict. He's like
and he's a
sneaking
drug
around and
addict.
getting
Yeah.
drugs that have no effect on him. The whole movie. We see him take it, but it's like no effect on him.
And these cops are the younger cops that he has trained. They're his unit. Like they know his shit. Like
Yeah. And old boy with the clear eyes, like he's the
oh
same age.
yeah.
He's like as experienced. Like, why can't he?
Yeah, he's like the loyal second in command, right? He's like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
You could
Like
have had him hemmed up.
that's one
It,
of those situations where it's like only this person could possibly take down this other person.
yeah.
I'd
And
love
then
to
the
see the
back.
movie from his perspective now. Anyways,
Oh yeah. And then the backstory was like, oh, he lost his son.
yeah,
They make it unclear exactly what happened. I guess his son was kidnapped from the pool. He was at a pool with his son.
yeah,
He goes underwater, like they're playing a game, like how long can you hold your breath? And when he comes back up, his son is gone.
yeah.
So he was kidnapped,
Never saw him again.
never saw him again, presumed dead.
Yeah.
Like I felt like that backstory was too much. It was too much.
It was heavy, especially there's a scene where like they're trying to the guy, you know, the guy he's supposed to kill, right?
Right.
Ultimately, he's Tom Cruise is being set up,
Yeah,
and
he's framed from a murder with the precox to hide another murder. Basically, basically.
it's pretty convoluted. Like, so they hire this guy to pretend like he's the murderer of Tom Cruise's son, and like even that guy when he's like confessing, quote unquote, he's like saying some pretty fucked up stuff. Like he's like, I wrapped him in a barrel and everything was fine. He didn't hurt. I'm like this is like serial killer level,
Right.
like like mine hunter type that show or whatever, like set David Fincher 7. Like you're
Yeah.
not gonna like we need to spend more time with this if you're going to introduce it. Like it's gotta have a
Yeah.
point, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So yeah, to explain the movie, if you haven't seen it, it's almost impossible because it's just too involved. There's too many like little nicks and knacks.
Yeah,
But the
yeah, definitely.
precogs are people that were basically crack babies on this new drug. So they can kind of see murders before they happen, but only murders, not all crimes. Only
Mhm.
murders because the intensity of a murder is a even that explanation, I'm like, the intensity of a assault isn't as much as a like
Right. And that's another thing was like in the original story, it was all crime.
it was
So
just
it's
all
like,
crimes. Yeah.
so that I was like, where's that choice?
They should
Like,
have
what?
just made it all crimes. So Tom Cruise is framed for this murder, so he basically kidnaps a precog so they can try to figure out who he was framed for murdering and find that person. Of course, that's it all becomes like, what's it called when you set up your own, you know what I mean? You set up your own
Oh, like
failure.
a yeah, 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 like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
This becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They run into the guy and he's like, why would I murder this guy? I've never seen him before. And then they see all these pictures of kids.
Yeah,
And it's like, oh, this guy is a child, whatever. They don't
yeah.
say, but
Let's
he
let's not
definitely
touch on it.
kidnapped some kids and whatever. But it was all a setup. Those pictures were staged. The guy didn't do it. And the guy is framed and told, like, if you go through with this and let him kill you, your family will get money, or like we won't hurt your family kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Which is
yeah.
also like double convoluted. This guy wasn't a criminal or anything. He just needed money for his family, I guess.
Well, no, I thought they said. Oh, maybe I
No,
thought
you
they
might
said
be
they got
right.
him out of jail.
They got him out of jail to do it.
I
Yeah.
think they said they got him out of jail, but then I'm like, even more so, like, cause like if you have this guy who was already in prison in the prison system get killed, like, how did he get out? You got to explain that. Like,
Yeah.
like
And when was he in jail? The son was like, that was like 20 years. It was like years ago when his son was missing. It
it
was,
was wild. It was wild.
it
It's
was
one of the things, and again, I actually found a lot of things still enjoy about the movie. So I'm really not bagging on it, but there were some things that we have to talk about.
Okay.
But like
We're definitely getting into the weeds of like uh just kind of complaining and
for sure,
and
for
being
sure.
confused, just being confused.
But it was generally confusing. You know what I'm saying? But it's like one of the things that I always have trouble with like mystery shows is because sometimes when we writing mysteries is hard.
Yeah,
And we did a great mystery last week, right? But
yeah,
writing mysteries is hard. But like sometimes when you try to do too many switcheroos, it's like you out finesse yourself as the writer.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
And I felt like this is one of those situations where like the people writing it maybe didn't understand the mystery that they were writing. They just kept what another turn, what another turn,
yeah,
what another turn. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So that's it.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, 100%. Just turn, 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 like a Beatles song.
Incredible, incredible. What did you feel about the just the fact that Max von Sydow's character in this movie, the old guy, is he's clearly a millennial. That's like our age group.
What?
That old dude, it's 2054. That dude's a millennial. He was
Oh,
born in the
he's
80s like you and
us
me. He
now
had
in
to
the
be.
future. Yeah,
That's us, man. We're corrupt and villainous.
yes. Still doing the same old bull,
Right.
trying to cover himself. And even the
Yeah,
reason he was covering himself, oh my goodness. I think this
crazy.
movie like jumped a shark at some point
It really
in
did, and I
history.
don't know where. You know.
I mean, like historically, maybe with like 2009, this movie was like, nah, that doesn't work.
Oh,
It just doesn't
oh,
work.
oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah,
Yeah, it absolutely wild. But I agree with you. Like, there's something about it because like I don't know if it's Spielberg's next movie after this, but Catch Me If You Can can't be too far after this, can it?
probably not. Yeah, same
And I
time.
just felt like this was maybe like him working some of that chase movie mechanic out. You know what I mean? Because it's more of a chase movie than it is almost anything else.
Yeah, because like we said, they don't really like Tom. I guess the Colin Farrell character is the one. Yeah, Catch Me If You Can actually came out in the same year.
Oh wow.
So it's like, what is the question of this movie, right? And I think it's these are hard questions for really the privileged class to even really address.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, the idea of a future is so perfect because they stop murderers. You know, it goes back to this very binary thinking of criminal versus non-criminal, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it hints at is it ethical? Is pre-crime as an idea ethical or relevant?
Mm-hmm.
Or that the way to stop crime is like these predictive forces, which the government, police departments use. They use all kind of predictive measures, and even the rise of AI hints at that capability, and they are using that capability now. You know, you
Totally.
have to really get into police stations or FBI to understand, but every once in a while, an article comes out that explains how they're using these predictive models, and they, you know, sometimes they catch somebody that's really bad with bad intent, and sometimes they catch an innocent person.
Straight up.
So none of these models, you know, they had to add this like super science fictiony magical method of the precogs to be like, oh no, they're not just, you know, catching random black people and random immigrants, you know.
Right.
It's like this.
Right.
And when we go into the jail, it's almost I think this movie's all white, except for Steve
Yeah.
Harris.
Pretty much. Pretty much. The like bad neighborhood, whatever they called it, the sprawl or something like
Yeah,
that. Like that was all
it was all white
poor,
people.
poor white people. Like, yeah, it's pretty much all white.
And that's another way they can make these projects without dealing with any issues. It's just like, oh, the
Mm-hmm.
future would just make it mostly white or all white. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe there'll be like some light skinned people in there in the background walking around. But it's just if
Right.
everything's white, then we're working on an even playing field, and we can
Right.
say that this is good or bad without having to deal with discrepancy and inequality. You know?
Yeah. It's kind of, I made earlier about, telling a white slavery tale, but like that does happen in sci-fi and fantasy so often, right? Where it'll be like, you know, this person's playing an elf, and in this world, elves are enslaved or whatever, but it's all
Right.
white actors, right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
it's a slavery story with no people of color, or something like that, or any other thing, right? And so it is really interesting to tell a story about like what it is to truly be able to make your own decisions and all of that stuff, and not deal with any of this. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
One of the Were you gonna say something?
Mm-mm.
One of the things that I thought was interesting about the movie, and I think this is actually a good thing, but it does kind of touch on what we're talking about now, was this was made in like 99, right? And it's set in 2054, but so much of like the detective-y style of it, and some of the design choices and the original story were all written in the mid 50s.
Sure. Yeah.
So I felt like it was like doing something really interesting, where it was like making a future that's 50 years in the future, but reflecting a storytelling style and some design choices from 50 years in the past. But also they did the thing that the noir detective story in the 1950s would have did, which was not have any black people.
Yeah. It's
New
so much
York
easier.
City, no black people, no Hispanic people.
You got to imagine, like, if this is made, there are like protesters, and there's more than a couple black people, and it's like, or
Yeah,
there's like one main case that kind of looms over the movie of a black man who was framed for murder. The
yeah.
precogs got it wrong, and that's kind of something that looms over the characters. I think this backstory with the son, that's obviously just so he could be framed for murder.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they should have done with that, but not what they did.
Not what they did. The
Without dealing
idea,
with the fact that the precogs don't see child abductions, they don't see
yeah.
child assaults, Obviously the precogs were, well, actually, I don't know if the precogs were after that happened or not.
I think they might have said that. I'm having trouble
Yeah.
remembering exactly, but I think they might have said that.
But, and then this cop with all these tools doesn't find the guy, like he can't, it seems like he would have been like kind of singularly devoted to finding who killed his son.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I guess, they say, well, he's trying to stop all murders because his son was murdered. So that's like his motivation. But yeah, it just lacked like character to me, and
Yeah.
and personality, and it really relied on Tom Cruise, who just kind of comes fully packaged.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, we're following Tom Cruise, but that character was like paper to me.
Totally. I felt like there was a lot of stuff that was really just the tropes of like a noir detective story, right? Um like the fact that he's a drug addict is like, that's like your classic
Classic.
1950s
Yeah.
hard drinking detective, right? Like,
The only thing he wasn't, and this is probably because it's Tom Cruise, is just like a serial womanizer. That would have been it,
right.
the missing link.
Totally. Like even the part in the beginning, like where he's like watching the video of his son, and then he's like talking to the video of his wife, and it's like that's the classic scene where the detective's in his office, like staring at the picture of his ex-wife, or
Right.
something like that, you know.
Yeah.
And but I will say this: I forgot that his wife was alive too. Like I forgot the whole
Until
thing
we saw her. Yeah.
until we saw it, and then I was like, "Oh no, that's so creepy." He was like, "Hey, baby, do you want to go to bed?" Like talking to the thing in the beginning. I know
Yeah.
he was high off of whatever he was on. He was on that heavy stuff, but
It was
like,
weird. It was
I was,
weird.
yeah. Again, so much very horny movie for sure. Crazy horny.
So you can see what Spielberg did here, in terms of his career. You were saying Catch Me If You Can. So
Mm-hmm.
it was big sci-fi. AI, the
Mm-hmm.
movie, artificial intelligence, was 2001. This was first in this quadruplet.
And
He went
I
from,
think he shot AI before this though. Maybe.
It came out before this.
Oh yeah, that's what you're saying.
So
Sorry. Okay.
here's the order. Here's the order.
Okay.
AI, then Minority Report, then Catch Me If You Can, then The Terminal. So here's the order. It's like
Wow.
future, very future, artificial intelligence. Then he does Minority Report, which is less future, chase. Then he does Catch Me
Hmm.
If You Can, which is chase with a lot of quirkiness. Then he does a
Yeah.
terminal, which is all quirk.
And
It
Catch
was
Me
like
If You
one
Can.
really led to the other. It was like tech led to tech, chase led to chase, chase led to quirk. Quirk and the chase led to quirky movie.
And not only the quirk though, but also the like in Catch Me If You Can, he's like a pilot.
Yeah.
And then Terminals is like so airplane piece
Terminals
of
and
it
airplane.
too.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I'll take it a step further. I'll take it a step further, bro.
I
All these movies are the same movie. Those four movies are all the same. A
would, yeah,
lone, late 30s, 40-year-old white dude. I guess the terminal he was a little older, but a middle-aged white dude who's like trying to catch something and dealing with like an extreme loss in his own life.
yeah,
They're like literally the same movie, just in completely different venues in a way.
man. Like, just thinking about AI as being the same movie as Minority Report is crazy, but it really is true. Because like, there's also like a chase element. There's also like a trying to find the truth element, a
Mm-hmm.
mystery sort of deal.
The AI is his helper, and this one, the precog, is his helper. Catch Me If
Yeah,
You Can. And he had a couple different helpers, and his dad was kind of like complicit in helping
yeah,
him.
yeah, yeah.
The terminal, it was the flight desk lady who was the helper,
Man, I will say when
and they all had
Stevens,
like
ooh,
a a totem. You know,
mm,
I can't remember exactly what is an AI, but obviously in this one, it's like uh, not the drug, but you know, the things that remind him of his son. And Catch
oh
Me If You
yeah,
Can, it's like the watch, you know, that his dad gave him. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
my bad. I cut you
No,
off.
no, no, you good, you good, you good. Yeah, no, I just think it's interesting, man. When Steven Spielberg is like really in his like moment, that boy produces because like he's had many, many years where he'll do like two movies a year.
Yeah.
Like 93, he had Jurassic Park and Schindler's List. I think there's been a couple others too, you know? Like,
Well, when you look at this run, it's 2001 is AI, 2002 is Minority Report, Catch Me If You Can, 2004 is a terminal. And like you said, Minority Report was done before 9/11.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
AI, before AI was Saving Private Ryan, a huge movie. He just never stopped shooting. He just
He
always
never
shooting a
stopped shooting.
movie.
He's never stopped shooting. And the fact that you said 2002 makes me realize I misspoke earlier. I thought this movie was like 2007, and I was surprised when I saw that it was
It was 2002.
2002.
I thought
Yeah.
it was later too until we started watching it.
It's like, oh,
It's like, oh, this movie was early 2000s, which is like an achievement for the tech, I think.
yeah.
You know, more than I realized. Definitely had like big Matrix feel too.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, this is like Matrix influenced here. Some of the tech, some of the way that they're depicting the future.
For
But
sure.
yeah, when you look at his filmography, there's never a gap more than 3 years. And when there's a 3 year gap, it's usually a huge movie that followed. So that means
Yeah,
he
he's
was
been working it.
usually when there's a gap where it's like 3 years, then it's like two movies follow, or it's back to back to back movies follow. So this guy is just he's making movies like any job that's 9 to 5
Yeah.
that you get 2 or 3 weeks vacation off in a year. He's never not shooting a movie. That's
100.
insane, man. Take a vacation, Steve. Jesus Christ.
Steve, take a
Treat
break.
yourself, man. Like take a year. Take a year off. You're 80, bro. I have a whole thing where I'm like, I don't need to see a movie from an 80-year-old unless it's their first movie. That
Yeah.
it would be interesting to me, but I don't get super excited about a new Spielberg or Scott or Scorsese or et cetera, et cetera.
Same.
And part of it is a sense of like they've done their best work. They were in their prime. They did their movies in their 20s, 30s, 40s. They've done it for so long. We have such a catalog. I don't want to
Literally our entire lifetimes, you and me.
longer than,
Longer than, yeah, for sure.
and it's definitely not a disrespect thing,
For sure. They're
but it's
legends.
also just, it's just not an excitement thing. It's just not like, I'm like, oh man, the new, the Flower Moon, you got to go see. Scorsese did it again. He did it again, and I'm gonna see somebody else do it for. It's time to, it's kind of like the NBA. And I'm a LeBron fan. I like Steph, KD, but it's like y'all young guns got to start pushing these old dudes out. Like it's time.
Yeah.
It's time for y'all to stake your claim. But in a world where numbers don't matter as much, which is a whole other thing. But when we're in the streaming world, numbers are different, and box office is different, and the way things are set up, even beyond streaming, is just like the more lucrative bet is to go with what people already know. And people kind of flock to like, oh, I'm gonna go see the such and such movie. It's gonna get talked about more because of all the outlets we have and all the voices need to be heard. And everybody who's trying to make a name is gonna be like, we're gonna talk about the Scorsese movie. We're not gonna talk about the story is in Scorsese. That's what's gonna sell the papers, get the clicks. Get the clicks, not selling any papers. Nobody's selling papers anymore.
Nobody, yeah, nobody sold a paper in a long time.
Yeah, so basically the point is that the market is like lopsided. So things that are established are weigh even more now than they ever did.
Yeah.
And the market doesn't have a chance to regulate it. It's all corporate interests that push stuff up, regardless of what people want or don't want. And it makes it so there's less room for like imagination and experimentation. It's like if you're doing things the way they've been done, bam. And of course, these old directors are going to do what they've been doing. At 80, you're not innovating. You're like,
yeah,
you know what you're doing. You're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, you're iterating, if anything.
Yeah, which is of course not to say that any of the new work these people are doing is bad. That's not the point. It's just wanting voices of our generation, not to always be stuck in these old generation.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think I mentioned it on a past episode. I don't really know when, but it is really 9/11 that shifted a lot of that. When 9/11 happened, like across all entertainment forms, movies, novels, graphic novels, TV, like business kind of ground to a halt. And when it came back after, like basically movies like this that were already completed came out.
Right.
But there was like a year, 18-month gap there or something where there was like really nothing in production. And when things started roaring back into production, they kind of stopped taking bets on new voices.
For sure.
And I think why in the 2000s you really see the disappearance of Black movies. You know what I'm saying? And you see a lot of disappearance from a lot of indie side things in all, like in music and everything. They really started taking bets on the heavy hitters already. And 23,
yeah,
I was just gonna say 20 years on, man, it really hasn't stopped.
What's crazy is that we consistently have these long stoppages. It was like 9/11, and then
2007.
We have a recession, but then we have a 100-something day writer's strike in like 2008. Literally stops everything again. Then we have a pandemic. Jumping ahead, there's obviously other things that happen. Then we have a pandemic that stops stuff. Then we have another 150-day writer's strike just after just after lockdown. Right. Stop stuff again. So yeah, coming out of that, it's no wonder there's like another Spielberg, Scorsese. You open up, social media. It's like, oh, Ridley Scott's doing another movie, and whoever else that's really made their bones in like the 70s or the 80s is making another movie. Coppola's got a big movie. Because it's like, well, we know what these guys are gonna do. There's no time for risk. We've had two major world-stopping work stoppages.
Yeah.
Spielberg, save us again. Scorsese, save us. Marvel, Batman, Superman, Spider-Man. What do you got? What do you got? Give me Meryl. What are you doing? What are you doing? Get us consistent.
Gotta make money, baby.
Hey, Ryan, Ben Affleck, come on, my boy.
It's a real like Gil from The Simpsons sort of deal. Like one day things are gonna work out just fine. Just gotta keep moving. But yeah, it is really interesting. That said, I want to go back to that thing you said about the special effects. I did think that they held up pretty well. I thought the only way that they didn't hold up was just the fact that like it's been 20 years.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So that's you're gonna have some loss. I thought what was really interesting is some of the things that made it so that they stood out a little bit more as 20-year-old effects was actually something that I find admirable because 20 years ago when they made this movie, they decided to shoot so much of it in bright light. And like that's a real like act of confidence with special effects because usually you do it dark so you can't see that it's not that great. You know what I mean?
no,
And
Spiels was definitely trying to show off,
yeah, Spills was showing off, and I was like, okay, I see what you're doing there. I see like this is a cocky move. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Also, they in terms of using the ads and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
just a hint at all the propaganda that there would be, because there was always an ad going like, "The precogs are making safe. Look how they
Mm,
stopped all the murders. This is wonderful. What a wonderful world you live in, where there are no murders because of the precogs and the special police unit that are keeping you safe." Like that would be running when he was trying to find stuff and going through the subway and stuff. I was like, yeah, that was actually like a good use of propaganda and how you how overwhelming it could be with any technology if they would constantly be reinforcing this message.
I thought, yeah, I thought. I'm so glad that you said that because there was a thought that I had while watching the movie, and specifically some of those scenes. Um, and I'm blanking on my man's name, but I was like, I felt like this was Spielberg trying to do Paul Verhoeven, like dude who did RoboCop and he did
Mm,
Starship Troopers, and
yeah,
those are like real over the top satires that are like critiques on modern society.
yeah,
And I was like, I never really saw that before, but watching it this time, I was like, okay, this is Spielberg trying to do like Verhoeven.
yeah, yeah.
And like maybe this should have been like somebody with a more of a Verhoeven sort of like outlook on the world might have landed this one a little bit stronger.
Yeah. I think the last thing I'll say about like the themes of it is just how like pro cop it was, and the idea that like
Mm-hmm.
the cops in the system are fine. There may be one bad actor who's trying to manipulate it. Otherwise, it's 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 fine. But I guess at the end of the movie, they aren't using it like pre-crime is abandoned because of this thing,
Mm-hmm.
which is also you know, kind of the privileged class of like, oh, if it's proven faulty, they'll just get rid of it and people will be fine. And it's like, what is this happily ever after?
Yeah.
It's it's very Spielberg. And again, not to criticize one of the greatest filmmakers, but he could definitely be very just naive in his filmmaking, and it's
Mm-hmm.
in his storytelling, not in his filmmaking, in his storytelling.
That's a
It's
great
like
distinction.
this happened, this was bad, and he just goes on, and then they figure it out, and then everybody's cool. It's happily ever after at the end. They just disband pre crime, and the precogs are be able to live like people with like no trauma. It's good. Tom Cruise is good. He's still a cop. Him and his wife
Yeah.
get back together and have another child. Just imagine how great it would be if everybody got exactly what they needed at the end of the movie.
Yeah, totally. Uh Pull back on crane shot, music swells, and credits, folks. Yeah.
Don't you feel good about that? I feel good about that. Wrapped up, happily ever after. That's how I think. Yeah, happily stories get bad, and then the happily ever after. That's how it
Yeah, he
goes.
does always do a happily ever after. And this, as we're talking about this, and again,
He is the fairy tale director.
he's the fableman, right? Like
He is the
like
fableman.
he is the fableman. And as we're talking about this, you know, it really does sound like not only something that would be good to be rebooted, but maybe something that does need to be rebooted. I feel like Philip K. Dick's stories are always going to get optioned again and again and again.
Yeah.
So 23 years later or 21 years later, it might be time to
It,
start thinking about Minority Report.
it could, or the series Law and Order PCU, Pre-Crime Unit.
Yes, it probably it has been a series. There was a like there was like a Fox. I think it was Fox. Maybe like in 2017 with Megan Good. Yeah, it only lasted for half a season or whatever. It got like its initial like maybe 9 or 13, and then it didn't come back. But it was interesting update to the world. But yeah, it probably is like due for a non-network style maybe
You know what
TV
the
show.
problem probably was? Just kind of digging into it a little bit, and then we're getting the casting wrapped
Yeah,
up. It's more than a decade after the events of the movie. It should not have been a continuation of the movie.
yeah. Needs to
If
be a
that's what they
reboot.
were thinking, yeah, it's a continuation. Pre-crime unit was dismantled, forcing law enforcement to discover newer methods. But now they're trying to, yeah, it's a little convoluted here. But
Yeah,
they
I
should have
think
just
if I
started it at
remember
zero. Kind of the same we were saying, like with Shaft. Like Shaft is always Shaft. I don't want son of Shaft, and this
right.
is his nephew, and it's like no, just start from zero. Minority Report, the show, should just have been Tom Anderton in the pre-crime unit. Whatever case from the book, you don't need it. You don't need that. You
Right.
start from scratch. You make case of the week with
Yeah.
a slight serial element, so we can see a journey for him.
Yeah. And the serial element could even be that he finds out that he's going to kill somebody, but no one else knows, and he's trying to solve that crime. Like you could do that. You know what I mean?
Oh, what they did was one of the precogs
Yeah, that's what I
became a
was.
cop, and now he's using his ability with a cop to prevent crime. Like that's already not Minority Report. You've gone too far.
Yeah. It was
That,
it's one of those things where it's like just kind of like that show Castle where they brought in like the crime writer who knows all about crime to be a cop.
yeah,
You know, it's like it was very much that sort of TV. Like there's the detective and then there's her brilliant consultant, right?
right. Monk. It's just
Monk,
any like
Sherlock
special cop,
Holmes, you know what I
Sherlock
mean?
type of any show, Sherlock type of show.
Which is, yeah, like you said, not Minority Report, right?
Yeah.
That's Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, yeah. When you don't have the precogs, you've already lost it. So
Yeah. So, I mean, you want to switch into casting?
let's do it, Scast. Let's start with Tom.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
I only got two here. I was having, but I can like also play
Yeah,
around as we go.
We'll
But I got Tom and I got the precog. So Anderton, I'm gonna go John David Washington. I feel like, you know, it had we made it at the time, it would have been Denzel. And in
He's
2023,
definitely the sci-fi guy now, the Tenet.
it's John David Washington for
I,
sure.
I tried to go really out of left field, so it would be like just different people. I went Columbus Short
Oh, wow.
from Stomp the Yard.
Yeah, yeah.
He's like a
Interesting.
short guy like Tom Cruise, and it's like I feel like he has an intensity that could like mimic the Cruise intensity. Columbus Short. Uh, he
I'm
was great.
innocent.
He was great in the Stomp the Yard where he was stomping that yard. That boy was stomping that yard, boy.
Wait.
Tell you what. Who else you got?
Uh
Precog. Agatha.
Agatha.
Yeah.
Agatha. Also Agatha Christie. That's the precogs all have uh
Names of
famous mystery crime writers, which Agatha Christie came up last week for us. But anyways, Agatha, I'm gonna go with Megan Good. She was in the show. We're gonna bring her back.
That makes sense. I'm gonna go Kerry Washington
Yeah.
because the intensity that Agatha had in her moments, I feel like Kerry already does that. I just gonna put, and I don't think we really casted her on this pod much yet. So I was like, man,
Yeah,
we gotta get Kerry Washington in there. You know,
for sure.
um,
Who you want to do next?
yeah, Colin Farrell. I think he kind of had a really small part actually. You think he's gonna be in the movie more as like the foe, but really only in a few scenes.
I feel like if I remember correctly, that was like one of his early American, maybe even like first big American movie.
Probably.
Nah, he was in that Hearts War thing, I think, with it doesn't matter. It
Yeah,
really doesn't.
we'll let it go. He could have been in a lot of things. I'm gonna go with also since I was on the Stomp the Yard page looking up Columbus, I'm going with Brian White, who was also in
Mm,
Stomp the Yard. He was like the bad guy, not the bad guy, but like the opposition in Stomp the Yard. And a guy you just don't
mm,
see a lot, or he's kind of like a character actor. But man, shout out Brian White. Bring him back. Why not?
for sure.
Um, and then likewise for the character, the detective, the second in charge guy, Neil
Oh,
Mc,
Steve Harris. Oh, Neil
uh,
McDonough.
Neil McDonough. I go with Robert Richard, who kind of has a similar look. He has like the clear eye, like the blue eyes of the black dude.
Yeah, yeah,
They like
yeah.
look the same, so I just put him, and he was also in Stomp the Yard. But the guy from we look him up. He's been a lot. He was like in kids programs, One on One, back in the day. Not my cousin, but some Nickelodeon show he was in. He wasn't Cousin Skeeter. Yeah, he was the brother in Cousin Skeeter. He was the son in Coach Carter, like the good son before he
Hmm.
he switched. Yeah, so he's been doing this for a long time, and he has the same look of that guy.
Okay. I'm gonna go like similar, like kind of lighter skin, lighter dude, just lighter colored, complected dude. I'm gonna go Kingsley Ben-Adir
As which one?
as that Neil McDonough character, that like kind of second in
Did
command.
you have a Colin Farrell?
Actually, man, like now that I'm thinking of it, he'd be a great Colin Farrell, uh, or rather a great version of that character. Because I was like looking up one night in Miami, I'm gonna go with Leslie Odom Jr.
Sure. And then maybe Max Bonds, the
For
Fido.
sure. Um, well, you know what, man? I think it's gonna have to be. Um, I'm looking at his face and I'm blanking on his name. Morgan Freeman.
I'm gonna go Ernie Hudson. Shout out
Ooh, that's a great choice.
Ghostbusters fame. Somebody we haven't definitely mentioned, and he's in something now, but it's worth looking up. Ernie Hudson. He's in something now. He's good. Underrated legend.
Yeah, he's in something on Netflix, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right, cool, man. Minority Report, a confusing movie.
Incredibly confusing. I remember it being so straightforward. It is not.
It is not
It is not.
very pro cop, very
It is.
just very action. It's just like come to see something, kind of a futuristic fairy tale. I don't know,
Yeah,
but
I'm.
also not awful. But I don't know if you kind of want to sit through 2.5 hours of it either. It's long for how simple it is.
Yeah, I don't know that it's a. Yeah, I don't know like that. This is a movie like I recommend to like young people who maybe haven't seen it, or just anybody who hasn't seen it before.
Yeah,
Now after going back, maybe I would have 3 days ago,
right.
but now I don't know that I recommend it.
Yeah,
But interesting, definitely an interesting peek at like where things were. And I don't know, man, it is a very interesting capsule, I think, for what for a vision of the future that we thought we were on until a huge world changing event like 9/11 made that future immediately obsolete
yeah.
before the movie even came out.
You know, even before cell phones were as
Yeah,
like you
as
said,
ubiquitous as
9/11 chain. And I think this is also a really good like touch point for action movies. Not that they were all one way before and then they were one way after, but this definitely you can use it to market change and how they ended up becoming in the 2010, which was
for
just
sure.
like twist, twist, twist. You know what I mean? Build up and then you kind of solve the movie and then a big third act action scene and where it's kind of convoluted and you're like, it's like, am I even following the movie? But it just keeps moving and trucking along and that's where kind of where action ended up going and being longer than it even needed to be. A film noir movie, no, old film noir movies weren't like
90
made to be
minutes.
epics. They were like quick detective stories, and this one is like epic. It's noir action, $100 million sci-fi, But also this
Mhm.
movie was made like 4 times the budget, so
Yeah, I noticed that it was a big hit when I looked it up. Yeah, it just It's interesting. I do wonder what a reboot or a rehash of just the basic premise could look like in 2023, you know, after everything that has happened since this movie came out. You know what I mean?
I mean,
Or
I
since
think
the
you
movie
do.
was completed.
I think. Well, we could talk about it, but just quickly, then we get off. We kind
Yeah, for sure.
of into another territory. But like, if you start with there's an immigrant who's charged with a murder, claims it, like that's the overarching case for the season.
Mm-hmm.
And then week to week, you're like uncovering clues about that case. But then there's other cases and murders he has to stop, and most of them are like violent crimes. And then at the midpoint, there's one that's like, something ambiguous about it, something,
Yeah,
so then it changes the tenor of the overarching case, and then that's like how season one goes.
for sure. I think you got to throw some precog like ghosty things in there in the sense that like they're having like little ghost flashes that are going to
100%.
learn, and then as like Anderton's getting into like what that ghost thing is, he sees like a clip of his face, but no one else knows. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, you still gotta have that
You
element
got
of,
you gotta build up to that over the
yeah.
course of a season.
So like the penultimate episode, he's like face to face with somebody, and it's like, oh, he's about to kill him. But then maybe they also start seeing like other crimes slowly. They see like a bank robbery, and it's like, oh wait, I don't know. You got to build out the world, over time.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know, man. Very interesting. Let's talk further about it
Yeah.
off off camera.
So yeah, Minority Report, check it or don't. I don't know. Not a must see
Uh,
at this point.
yeah,
Read the book.
yeah. Read the book. It's a novella, so it's short.
It's short. Yeah, Philip K. Dick. Read the book. That's what I'd recommend. And we'll catch you guys as we wind down the
For
season three.
sure.
Black Eyes and White Movies
Hope
later.
you enjoyed that. Later.